Welcome to My Boulevard podcast, where we talk about everyday issues from a biblical and balanced perspective. I'm Dhati Lewis, and this season we're diving into fighting for the faith in today's culture, navigating deconstruction and reconstruction, and featuring the voices of poets, pastors, practitioners, and polymaths. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy today's episode.
What's up, everybody? I am here with a very, very special guest. Some of you guys, if you've been following the My Boulevard and Good Culture, you already introduced to her, and you have been participants in so many great episodes that she has been a part with my brother. And I just want you to know that you lift up the value of those episodes and those. So I'm just thankful.
That's true, actually.
Yes, I know. It's 100%.
I hope he sees this. I hope he sees this.
He's not going to see it because he doesn't look at my stuff.
Uh-oh.
But but it is one of those things. But like Anastacia, I'm just really excited. I mean, just getting a chance to connect with her. We just met each other, since show.
Yeah.
And just being a part. And she is like the true definition of a polymath, and so you guys know, if we've been talking about this concept of pastors, poets, practitioners, and polymaths, she is a polymath. And I want to spend the first half of this just talking about kind of her as a polymath. I'm just so intrigued, so engaged about kind of all of what she does. Like, her official title is she's the founder and CEO of Arena Impact, right? Which is basically organizational development, yes, and all of that. And even that is just so intriguing and all that. But Anastacia, why don't you just kind of just kick us off and just tell us about Anastacia.
About me. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for just inviting me here. I'm super excited about this conversation. I think that your content is better than shows.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make sure that I said it. It's on record.
Okay.
I want him to see that I said that. So no, super excited. So I do a lot of things. I think honestly though, everything that I do, all the spaces that I find myself in boil down to one skill. And that's organizational development. I love to provide systems and structures for movements and ministries that will allow for sustainability. And so that requires that I be a transdisciplinary leader. And that means having a sense of knowledge and competence in a lot of things. So as a pastor, there's economic development work that has to be done in your city. There's trauma-informed care that you have to bring to your parishioners. There is political and civic engagement. There's youth development. There's leadership development. There's just a lot of things that even you as a pastor have to do in order to effectively shepherd well. And because I love ministry, I love the church, and I love people, I have spent a lot of time studying all of the elements of just what it means to be human in society, and try to get some level of mastery. And that's what makes me a polymath.
I love it. And I love you use words like transdisciplinary, and all these these words that are great. When did you know that you had to be transdisciplined?
You know what? I did it. I used to be called flaky and flighty. Mm-hmm. That's how, I think how people adults really understood me. Oh, one day she wants to do this, and one day that she wants to do that. She's over here, she's over there. She don't know what she want to do. And I internalized that for a long time too. Dang, maybe I just have to pick my one thing. And it wasn't until recently, I am actually studying, I am in a PhD program, and I'm studying something that's called transformative studies. And that's where I learned what it means to be transdisciplinary. It's connected to this idea of intersectionality, because we as humans are dynamic and complex. Therefore, our systems and our communities are dynamic and complex. And it requires a level of just new thinking in order to address some of the new problems that we are facing.
Yeah, I think that's you embody when we talk about the polymath, and really what you embody what we are trying to do with My Boulevard, right? Because we talked a little bit about it earlier, but just the concept of oftentimes we have our pastors, and our pastors are trying to solve the problem from their vantage point. And then we have the nonprofit leaders who get together and they try to solve it from their vantage point. And then the artists and the poets get together and they're looking at it from their vantage point. And but ultimately it needs to be kind of this interdisciplinary. There needs to be not just a one thing, but the approach. I mean, talk a little bit about why you see that as important.
Well, I see that as important because it's biblical.
Yeah.
When, in the scriptures, when we hear this imagery, or we see this allegory of the body, right? And if we think about our bodies, like even biologically, physiologically, there's the cardiovascular system and the musculatory system and the lymphatic system and the respiratory system and all of these systems that are working together perfectly to give us functionality. And so I think sometimes when we read the scriptures that says that we are one body, many members, we think only about the members that we can see: hands, feet, eyes, nose. But internally, there are like functional systems that are working in ways, in intricate ways that we're not always able to see. And so it's really rooted in like a theology of collaboration that drives me to be like a transdisciplinary leader.
That's good. And so, daughter of a pastor.
Yeah.
Daughter
of pastors, daughter in love of pastors. My husband and I are ministers in a tiny church, High Living Worship, in East Point, Georgia. And so for me, like even the work that I did as an assistant principal, the work that I'm doing as a nonprofit leader, as a CEO. As a CEO of my agency, all of that stuff is rooted in the gospel and what it looks like for me to make disciples and to support churches in developing systems that allow for disciple making to happen and flourish in their cities.
So how do you manage all of those things at once?
I got me a good man.
Yeah. Yes. No, I mean, I think, hey.
That's just the truth. I have a great husband, and he and I make an incredible team. We have a family calendar. We are very organized people. But then also, like I said before, I'm actually utilizing one skill in just a lot of different areas. And that's how it makes it or a lot of different places, I should say. But it's still the same skill. It's organizational development, leadership development. I happen to do it in the nonprofit space, in local government, in the church. It's the same thing, just different places.
So, all right. So tell me, how did you get into the political space? Or even passionate about politics and government? How did you get into that?
Again, I was really discipled into it. When I think about my faith formation, civic engagement and spiritual formation happened for me simultaneously because of the church that I went to as a college student. And so when I was learning about Jesus, it was not separate from engagement in the world. And so I started to think about what that would look like. It took me a while to land on it. I knew that I wanted to do justice oriented work, and I wanted to do work that really would remain. And so after college, I went to seminary, and then after seminary, I became a teacher because education is a civil right, and I just wanted to contribute to that. I spent some time here in the United States teaching, and then I went to the Middle East teaching, and my experience in the Middle East was very formative in terms of understanding the way that governments shape just the world. I wasn't a poli-sci major, and so it just wasn't on top of mind for me. But the governments in the United Arab Emirates and the United States are very different. And God just started to kind of speak to me about that. So when I came back to the United States, I really just was seeking opportunities. And I got introduced to some fellowships for young leaders who were thinking about policy for the first time. I applied for those fellowships. I got in. And so I started to just educate myself on what does this mean? What does this look like? And once I got a taste of policy making, it was over, because I realized this is the seat of power, and I am really trying to be a part of this in a meaningful way. So studying, just being a student, and the more I learned, it became civically educated, the more I felt compelled to remain civically engaged.
Yeah, that is awesome. I feel like you've lived 9 lives. I mean, all the stuff that you have done and that you have accomplished, and it's just there's so many things. And the reason why I was asking about politics is because that's really what I wanted us to dig into a little bit today, is this concept of politics, local engagement. And also, I would love to talk about kind of the intersection. There's a passage in scripture when I think about politics that oftentimes I think about, and it's Matthew chapter 22 and 21, where it says, and they're trying to trap Jesus because they're just are you for politics? Are you for you pay the taxes or not? And Jesus responds and he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar and give to God what is God. Yeah. How do you not compromise one for the other
Yeah.
is one thing that I would like to just kind of start off and kick off this conversation.
It is very difficult, honestly. And I think the reason why it's difficult is because I think right now we're struggling to discern what is Caesar's and what is God's. Like before I can even like give Caesar what is his and give God what is God's, I have to have a sense of discernment of like what is what. And I think because of all the noise that we are hearing these days from everywhere, people are really struggling. I am really struggling sometimes to discern what is actually of this government and what is of God's government. But I think when we look at Jesus and we reflect on what he prioritized, it can help us to decide and discern what we should prioritize as well.
Yeah, and that's really good, because let's just talk about like one thing, like voting, right? I grew up, right? I'm not going to say I grew up in a Christian home, but I grew up, and especially in my early years in college, you know, I would always hear, whether it's my family or whether it's others, it's like the friends that I hung around, how in the world can you be a Christian, right, and vote Republican?
Yeah.
And then I kind of went to a white evangelical seminary. I've been around more so evangelicals, and they asked the question, how in the world can you be a Republican?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, be a Democrat,
Yeah, I got
and vote, be a Christian?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, man, especially, and we see today, like even today, like the people who are so mad is like, how can Christians ignore the track record of a Donald Trump? And then Republicans were like, how can people ignore the policies that some of the Democrats are, you know, perpetuating? And so, like, what is your thoughts on just that? And when you're, in light of what you're saying, like discerning what's Caesar's and what's God?
The way I understand things, I feel like being like the two-party system, being a Democrat or being a Republican or whatever, to me, that's something that's Caesar's.
Yeah.
So that ain't got nothing to do with God anyway. And part of the reason why we know that is because like the Democratic and the Republican Party has changed so much since the 19th century, for example. If 19th century Christians were alive today, they would think that Democrats were Republicans and Republicans were Democrats. And I think that's instructive. It tells us that we can't put our faith or our hope in either of these things anyway. Now, does that mean that we should like disengage? No. And I'll like kind of speak to that in a second. But I feel like we have to frame whatever engagement that we do, you know, participate in with the truth that these systems be flip-flopping. All right. They be for one thing, one century, and they be for something else another century. And so we can't put our hope in them as if they have a spiritual grounding when they don't. They're grounded in what is Caesar's and and not what is God's. That's number one. Now, what do I do with that? What do I do with that knowledge? You know, again, for me, I have to, with great humility, with great prayer in community, and just with my own agency, decide how I interpret the scriptures and what I feel like Jesus' priorities are. It's not like Jesus lived in a world that didn't have a government system or that didn't have, you know, that they weren't wrestling with like sexual ethics, or what they weren't wrestling with, you know, abuses of power. Like, of course, this was happening. And Jesus still prioritized certain things in terms of what seemed to be like top of mind. And that's not for me to prescribe for anyone, but I do think it's a question that everyone should ask themselves. I know that Jesus lived in a similar world, and the people in his day were dealing with similar problems. Despite that, what does it seem like Jesus prioritized? And am I prioritizing the things that Jesus Jesus lifted up?
So, or do you believe that there is a such thing as voting for the lesser of two evils?
I think it's all evil. I think it's all crazy. I don't think it's God's system, but it's the system that we live in. And so I feel like it may seem like it may seem like a cop out to say like truly like vote your conscience and vote your spirit, but you do have to vote your conscience and vote your spirit. But you better be rest assured that you did the work with you and the king, not with you and, you know, pundits, you and commentators, you and the internet, you and Jesus really wrestled with what is the priority of the kingdom. And if you can look at God in his face and say that you did that wrestling, then that's your business.
What would you say is the difference between wrestling and then voting, and then putting your confidence and your hope in? And the reason why I asked that question is because I just met some of my friends were literally telling me that, hey, if I just said President Trump becomes the president, that they're moving to another country, and they had a specific country in mind. They had a plan. You know how you talk, when people have a plan, it's like it's a little further.
Yeah.
They had a plan. They already knew a government. They already knew exactly. They talked about what it costs to live there.
Yeah.
So they were really, so this is not just kind of just talk, but they had this, and you see that on both sides of like, if certain so gets elected, then I'm checking out.
Yeah, I guess I would say that we don't live in a fallen America, we live in a fallen world. And so although like the troubles of one country may not look exactly like the troubles of another country, rest assured trouble will be there.
Yep.
Trouble will be there. And so I don't have no problem with like people pursuing like dual citizenship. Like that's your right. This whole earth is the Lord's and therefore like belongs to you. You get to do that, but you don't get to run away from your assignment to make disciples wherever you find yourself and to be engaged in society in a meaningful way, no matter where you are. Like you don't get to run away from that. You have to do that wherever you go.
Yeah, I oftentimes like to make the distinction, like when people come ask me, because people oftentimes come to the pastor and try to get blessings to do stuff that they know that they're not supposed to do or whatever. And one of the questions I constantly ask is like, are you running away from something or are you running to something?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that is something that is really important for us to begin to wrestle with in understanding that it is the best place to be is in God's will, regardless of the chaos that's going around. The best place to be is in God's, will.
We're taking a quick break in this episode to invite you to the My Boulevard Conference. Join us October the 17th through the 19th in exploring what it means to live local and to become responsible of where you live, work, and worship. Embrace the beauty and the diversity of your boulevard that God has called you to. This conference is a great opportunity to be equipped through contextualized content and to cultivate community. We'll have great speakers, breakout sessions, a live good culture show, and lots more. For more information and to register, visit myblvdcon.co. Now let's get back to our episode.
I had to make a similar decision. Like I mentioned that I lived in the Middle East for a while and I dealt with some like hardship there because of, again, the way the government is designed. They just don't treat foreigners well. And I'll just like leave it at that. There's some real abuses of power, particularly when, not for the West. And if you're from the West, the red carpet is like rolled out for you. But if you're from other countries, there is some real stark abuse that happens there. And I had to make a decision, like, I don't know if I'm able to address this here, but I know like I can't necessarily divest from America, but I can divest from this. And I did. And I came on back home and I rolled up my sleeves and said, I'm going to find some work to get my hands, busy at. And that's really what was my introduction into local politics. But every country has its, to use like language that I know Show uses, like has its shadow and it has its gold. And you're going to find that everywhere because that's just humanity.
All right, so as we kind of zoom in on kind of locally, I would love just to kind of hear, what do you feel like the tenor, when we just had President Biden step down, and we have, Kamala basically, who's running and now against Trump. And so what do you feel like the tenor is going to be of as we come in these next few months?
I think it's going to get really bloody and nasty. I really do. I sense like a vitriol like I don't think we've ever seen before. And I think it's because we're not just contending with like conservative and liberal or like progressive values. I think we're contending with racism and sexism as well. And I hope that we're able to like rise above those things. And I'm not even saying, I'm not declaring my, self for any particular candidate right now. I'm just saying what I think is going to emerge from this candidacy.
I like to flip back from like Fox to CNN because like one event happened and they're both covering it just to see like the perspectives on each one of them. And it's just so interesting. So like even like when Biden made the decision and it came out, one station was saying, oh, it's the most heroic thing. And the other one was like, like this man is hiding a whole bunch of stuff and he's never told the truth. I'm just like, the perspective, this is crazy. And then, you know, you start like the ads have already started coming out talking about Kamala has slept her way up to the top. And then she's like, man, like the other ads are like, man, I'm convicting this felon and I've been a lawyer my whole life. I'm just like, this is crazy. And it's like, we are going for one another's soul.
Yeah.
You know,
the other thing is like, we are wildly distracted by these two people. And at the end of the day, we're not voting for two people. Actually, we're voting for two administrations. Yeah. And so I think that we have to like almost like not pay attention to these two figures. They matter. Like it would be incredibly consequential as a Black woman if to live through the presidency of a Black man and a Black woman, like that would be world shaking in ways that I just can't describe. At the same time, I wouldn't, regardless, we're not gonna just be beholden to these individuals. There are administrations and policies and agendas that we are gonna be subject to, and I think that we need to think about that. I feel like we have a crisis of prophetic vision. I think that we are so distracted by like the outrage that's happening yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and it's just like we are just turning our attention to things like quickly that we don't have like long-term vision for what it might actually look like to build this nation or to even build our cities. And I think that's what I'm most like disheartened by right now. But at the same time, God is on the throne. And I think there's a real opportunity for the church to be an example of what God's government could look like, no matter what the government looks like in America. Again, hear me when I say, please vote. Don't take that as like a license to like not vote. Vote and build.
Yes, that's good. And I think that is important. And not only vote nationally, but also vote locally. Yes. And that's where you have given a lot of your life and a lot of your work to now, is doing things locally where you live, work, and worship. So we oftentimes talk about My Boulevard is helping people take responsibility of where they live, work, and worship. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that you embody, you know. So what are some of the things that you're doing locally, and why is that important for you to get involved locally?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in Fairburn, Georgia for 3 years now. And as soon as we moved there, we set a meeting up with the mayor and with the city manager and with the city council people, like just introducing ourselves like, hey, we're the Johnsons. We live here. We have 2 kids. We worship here. Like, what does the city need? And that's easier to do in a city like Fairburn because it's fairly small. If you're in a larger city like Atlanta, it would take a lot more work, but you can pursue NPUs and things like that. But you know, it was very important that I get a sense from the people who have been leading this city, like what they've been up to and what they need, and try to figure out like where do the needs of the city align with like my skill set. And so some of the things that my husband is teaching music and arts in the city of Fairburn, because there was a lack of like youth like activities for the youth. I am leading My City Academy, which is a civic engagement initiative for 20 people in a cohort who are learning just the history of the city of Fairburn and like trying to figure out what it looks like for them to serve the city. Our city hasn't done anything like that before, and it was something that I came up with Councilwoman Samantha Hudson, shout out. And another thing is like I'm leading the Youth City Council, or one of the leaders of a youth city council, which is exactly what it sounds like. The young people are paired with a city council member and are learning what it looks like to actually run a city. They're learning public speaking and debate and ordinances and codes and all of the boring stuff, but that affect us every single day. So those are some of the things that we're doing just where we live in our local context.
That's awesome. And so just for those like me and others, outside of the obvious, right? What's the difference between local, state, and federal?
Yeah.
You know, how would you describe the differences in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So an example of something that your city would, or like your county would address is like the roads, or like your, the name is escaping me right now, but like the people that manage the development are like deciding what types of businesses
like
are coming. City planning,
planners.
Yes, but like your city planners are deciding like what type of businesses are coming into your neighborhood, or like if a pothole is going to get fixed, and if there's going to be like a new traffic light. They're also deciding things like how much taxes you're going to pay in property taxes, like things like that you really feel. Yeah. I don't know about you, but my property tax bill came and I said, baby, we in trouble.
Yeah. No. Mm-hmm.
So state governments are deciding larger things, for example, like how much Medicaid and Medicare is going to be like allotted to a country. They're deciding, another thing for local government is like school boards. Yep. School boards are deciding things like, what your curriculum, things like that. Mm-hmm. At the state level, you're deciding a lot of budgets, how much money is going to be allocated towards, like hospitals. How much money are teachers going to be made? We just recently passed legislation in the Georgia Women's Policy Institute to give paid leave for the first time to teachers in the state of Georgia. Like that had never happened before. Stuff like that is happening at the state level. And then federally, there's a lot of governance happening, but I think one thing that I don't think we always think about is like they're managing our relationships with other countries. Mm-hmm. They're managing like America's perception, trade, obviously like war and things like that. But they are really have a seat at the table when it comes to global politics. Yeah. And what you experience probably on a day-to-day is going to be shaped by your local and your state government.
Okay. So you don't have to answer this question, but are you a big government or small government type person? Local rule, federal, like where do you want the authority and power to land?
Yeah, I really feel like it should be with the states. I feel like local is like too granular. Yeah. Obviously big government is problematic for it's the America or any country is too diverse and the needs of the people are too diverse. I feel like most of the power should be with the states. Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. So why is it important, for us to engage in, and speak specifically like to believers, right? Believers to engage in their local, area. And what are some ways that you would recommend to do that?
Yeah, I just think it speaks to the gospel's like command for us to love our neighbors. That doesn't mean like that we have good feelings for our neighbors or that we have sentiment or emotion towards our neighbors. Like that's a part of it. Hopefully you like your neighbors, but that's not what the command is. The command is to like do well by your neighbors and to be thoughtful about what it actually would take for your neighbors to flourish. And I think that participating in local government allows for that. For example, showing up to tax code meetings where it's like if your neighbors are struggling financially, like supporting the effort to make decisions as to like how much taxes your neighbors pay, how much taxes you pay is like that's something that you can do to like really love your neighbor, or how much money is going to go towards like public and social services that your neighbors might actually need, or how your neighbors are going to be welcomed into a city that is unfamiliar for them, or how unhoused neighbors are treated within a particular city, or how incarcerated neighbors are attended to. This is our responsibility. I don't think that these things have to go through government. In fact, I feel like we're abdicating our responsibility to create solutions just as a church body. And if anything, I would say the church needs to become more organized, but that's another conversation. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to love our neighbors well, then we have to know what is impacting our neighbors, and engagement in local government can help us to know and support that.
So sometimes as pastors, and I have this conversation with pastors oftentimes, and going back to even the verse that we talk about, give to Caesar what is Caesar, to God what is God. You earlier on said that's Caesar's.
Yeah.
And, it's all, and so pastors have said abdicated the responsibility of engaging in local politics. It's not like historically, and especially in the Black church, where there was a lot of more engagement of the church connected to politics. Yeah. It seems like there's been a lot more differentiation.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? How would you encourage pastors not to get so involved? Because it was like we got to make disciples, right? We got there's biblical illiteracy. There's all of the things, like being able to kind of manage that tension. How would you encourage leaders or people within the church to do it, not either or, but a both and, or if that's even the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary function of the pastor is to shepherd, and like you could do that, but also there should be other leaders that are in the church that are empowered to like lead out on these other things. Like you don't have to shift your focus from disciple making or from like being a shepherd. Like do that. That's your calling. But the church is built off of multiple gifts, not just the gift of the shepherd. And so I think that would be an opportunity to let some of those other gifts like be known and be utilized in meaningful ways in the church.
Have you seen it done well? Because ultimately, you know, oftentimes as pastors, and I talk to them, it's like, listen, you're going to get about 3 hours a week from people. You ain't going to get much more, because that's like, that was what people have designated. And that's including Sunday service. So it's like, if we only have so much time to disciple our people and to train, because people are getting stuff in other places, how one, have you seen it done well? And how would you encourage that pastor that is struggling? I only got so much time to do it, and so I have to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah. I have seen it done well. My church, I feel like does it well. And I think it's because we have a somewhat of a decentralized approach to leadership that I think is really important, actually. It's like we have a senior pastor who we all acknowledge and like honor and submit to. And she has worked incredibly hard to lift up to a place of like equity the other leaders that have other gifts. And I think that we've also taken like an integrated approach to discipleship, where it's not just like spiritual formation apart from like missional work, like doesn't exist. Like those things are integrated in like in a real way. And my pastor kind of teaches us like I don't like, your faith is to me as strong as like your willingness and commitment to like loving and serving your neighbor. And so you could be as theological as you want to, but if you ain't serving whoever God has given you to serve, you saw the switch.
I saw it. I just want to know if all that came with it.
If you ain't serving whoever God has given you to serve, then it falls to the ground. It's not worth very much. And so I appreciate that integrated approach, and I also appreciate, again, just that decentralized kind of model of leadership that allows people like myself, even that have, I ain't nobody's shepherd, but has like a different gift to be to have authority in the church.
And so that's what I was going to ask you, like, how does that authority demonstrate? Is like giving up Sunday time? You're preaching on Sunday? Like, what are you, like, what are some of that looks like?
Become more concrete. Yeah, it looks like giving up Sunday time. It looks like focusing on different gifts in the ministry, like in terms of topics of teaching. It also looks like we focus a lot on like, what is the work that God has given you to do? What is the work that God has given you to do? And like doing that capacity building with people as a part of church. So it's not just like this sit and get thing. So we have like sermons every other week. So like in terms of infrastructure, we have like sermons that feel more like lectures every other week. And then every other week we have more like discussions that's based off of like real like skill building as a part of like spiritual formation. And so that's like the design. And there's another pastor that comes to mind. Her name is Dr. Vanetta West. I don't think it's a coincidence that these are two women, but Dr. Vanetta West, who has a similar model. It's more discussion-based biblical study. And I feel like the biblical literacy and the civic engagement are rising simultaneously because they're just teaching and being the church in a different way that I feel like we've grown accustomed to seeing. But that requires power sharing, and that's a whole nother conversation.
This is so good. I hope you guys have seen what I'm talking about. This is so good. We're going to have to come talk about, there's so many other things that we want to talk about. We want to talk about like our children. We want to talk about Gen Z, Gen Alpha. We want to talk about all that. So we're going to have you come on again and talk about that. But to kind of wrap up this conversation, what I like to do is give, the price, not The Price is Right, Family Feud. You've seen it before. You look at it. So at the end, like whoever wins, the family that wins, they bring them a couple people back up, and they got the speed round. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a speed round. All right. And the speed round is like you give them the quick answer to 4 questions, and it's all going to be, it could be quick. No more than 5 seconds though. All right. But it's going to be, a speed round about it. And let's just say we're going to put 60 seconds on the clock.
Okay.
And it's imaginary 60.
I
Put
got
60 seconds on the clock. And it's all going to be around this idea of local engagement, right? Christians locally engaging local politics. Yeah. All right. So we're going to go. Ready?
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. When it comes to Christians engaging in local politics, what's working?
Grassroots movements are working. Grassroots organizing.
What's broken?
Bipartisan collaboration is broken.
All right.
Yeah.
What's missing?
I don't think that we understand the electoral process and like the legislative process either.
All right.
Okay.
All right. You kind of answered what's confusing.
Oh.
You kind of answered that. What's missing?
So what's confusing is like the electoral process and the legislative process, that understanding. What's missing, I think, is prophetic vision. I think the church isn't organized. That's what's missing.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, I'm trying to be quick.
That was good. I loved it. Your speed even went up a little quicker. You had time.
Okay.
It was good. But hey, I love it. You played the game well.
All right.
Thank you.
Did I win?
You won.
Do I get the $20,000?
Hey, we don't have $20,000, but you get something.
All right.
You get something at the end. We'll make sure you get it. But
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I really do
absolutely.
appreciate
It's a
you
pleasure.
coming on, and we're going to have you on again.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about living local, and you can't get no more local than our children in our youth.
In that house.
So that house. So we're going to have come and talk later about that. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of This Is My Boulevard. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for listening to the My Boulevard podcast. And be sure to rate, share, and subscribe. And don't miss the My Boulevard Conference to be equipped to make disciples where you live, work, and worship. We're only able to continue equipping leaders through contextualized content and cultivated community because of the generosity of supporters like you. To give and to help fuel the mission, visit us at myblvd.co.